13 years ago, Michael threw a copy of the divorce papers at me and said, "I've sold the house because I'm moving in with her." At that time, I couldn't quite grasp what he meant. "So, Emily, the divorce is already final. Just take Kevin and get out already," he told me. Those words have stayed with me. I was surprised by Kevin's words when he returned from a job interview at a company. I asked the HR interviewer, "Does your company condone affairs?" The smile that spread across his face was unlike anything I'd seen before. Apparently, the interviewer denied it. So I continued, "That's strange. Then why are you sitting there?" Indeed, the interviewer was my ex-husband, Michael. "My name is Emily, I'm 48 years old. I work at a call center for an insurance company. It's just Kevin and me in the family. We were abandoned by Michael 13 years ago. I met Michael when I was 20. I had just graduated high school and got a job as an office worker at a subsidiary of a pharmaceutical company. That's when I met Michael, who was 27 at the time and had been transferred from the main office. He seemed interested in me for some reason and started asking me out to dinner. I had just become old enough to drink. I was definitely thrilled to be asked out by an elite from the main office. After a few such occasions, we started dating and I ended up pregnant. I was shaken. I thought he would be angry and break up with me. But then, Michael proposed marriage. When we went to greet my parents, he even told my father, who was still alive at the time, "I'll make your daughter happy." Back then, marriages due to pregnancy weren't seen very positively, so we had a simple ceremony. Eventually, our son Kevin was born. Michael returned to working at the main office, and I followed him, becoming a full-time homemaker. From then on, I devoted myself to taking care of the home. When Kevin started elementary school, we bought a house with some help from Michael's family. I thought I was living a happy life. But I was turning a blind eye to the fact that Michael was coming home less and less as Kevin grew older. Having married at the young age of 20, I had no idea what a normal married life was like. I didn't even question not knowing Michael's colleagues or superiors. In retrospect, there were plenty of signs leading to our divorce. And then, on Kevin's 14th birthday, Michael left us with these words: "I've already filed for divorce and sold the house, so get out." I went from a happy 35-year-old homemaker to a single mother with a 14-year-old son overnight. When I returned to my parents' home without any notice, my brother and his wife were cold to me. By that time, my father had passed away, and the house belonged to my brother and his wife. My mother, who was around 60 at the time, was overshadowed by my strong-willed sister-in-law and my blunt nieces. Amidst all this, Kevin and I were told, "You can stay for a bit, but find a job and move out soon." Back then, I couldn't think of any job I could do immediately. A high school graduate office worker with no special skills. But still, I had to make it work somehow for me and my son, Kevin. I devoured job listings, searching for something that would pay enough to support my growing boy and me. I was lucky, though. Kevin was 14. They say it's a tough age, but he had enough sense. Much better than a mother with a baby to care for. I jumped into a call center job at an insurance company. My experience in office work helped with handling phone calls. At first, I was a contract employee, but after a few years, I managed to become a full-time employee. It was an unknown world at first, and I was exhausted both mentally and physically. But as I continued working, I realized something. How little I knew when I got divorced. I was a high school grad, and my family wasn't highly educated. That wasn't everything, but my ignorance was one reason why I ended up in financial trouble after the divorce. It was a divorce caused by infidelity. I should have demanded alimony and child support from my husband, Michael, but the thought never occurred to me. My mother and brother were the same. Well, if my brother had cared even a little, he might have suggested something, anything, from his acquaintances, but he didn't. It was only after I joined the insurance company and learned new things that I realized I had been treated unfairly. But by then, too much time had passed. That's why I wanted Kevin to go as far in his education as he wished. Knowledge and wisdom can save you. I didn't want him to end up like me. Now, 13 years later, my job, salary, and life are stable. Kevin got into a prestigious science university and even made it to the doctoral program. As a mother, it was surprising. And he even said he'd manage the tuition himself. How, in the midst of his busy studies? He found some non-repayable scholarships and secured them for himself. I just had to sign the parent section. For years in university, 5 in grad school. He excelled and even got scouted by various companies. Like the saying goes, a bulk hen lays white eggs. Kevin's future must be bright. But sometimes, I'm reminded of that day. The day Michael left me. It still swirls darkly in my mind. It was so sudden. Michael came home, faced me and Kevin, and tossed a crumpled piece of paper at us. It was a copy of the divorce papers. I didn't remember signing them. But my name was written on it in handwriting similar to mine. When I asked what he meant, Michael said, "I've sold the house because I'm moving in with her." I couldn't understand what he meant. The divorce was completely out of the blue for me. "So, Emily, the divorce is already final. Just take Kevin and leave." He threatened not to be lenient if we didn't leave within 3 days. I was 35 at the time, having been just a homemaker for 14 years. I didn't know what to do and headed to my parents' house. Michael's voice still rings in my ears. Maybe I should forget it. After all, Kevin and I are living a fairly settled life now. It's not lingering attachment. It's frustration at my past helplessness and resentment towards Michael. Now I know I could do something about it. Then one lazy weekend, when I decided to sleep in, my phone's ringtone echoed. The number on the screen wasn't registered, so I decided to ignore it and went back to bed. But the call kept coming, breaking and resuming. Eventually, I heard a voice from the voicemail. It was my ex-mother-in-law. Repeating, "Please let me speak to your son." I wondered what she meant, but I decided not to answer directly. Later in the evening, Kevin returned home in a suit. When I mentioned the call, he burst into laughter, so she did come after all. He laughed so hard, shaking and banging on the table, tears in his eyes. "Kevin, what have you done?" "It's a job interview at the company today, right? I told you that, didn't I?" "Liar! Tell your mother the truth." "It's not exactly a lie," Kevin began, explaining what had happened that day. The interview was indeed a fact. He had been scouted by a pharmaceutical company he'd been in contact with for some time. But the problem was the company itself. The pharmaceutical company he mentioned was the same one where I used to work as an office clerk in a subsidiary. "Ah, it's not a coincidence," Kevin said casually. "By the way, the HR manager who conducted the interview was Michael Smith." "What did you say?" "Funny thing is, this guy had no idea I was his son." "You realized it?" "Of course. After all, I didn't need such an interview in the first place." "Why?" "This company came scouting for me, so there was no need for an interview." "But as HR manager, he must have seen your resume, right?" "He must have. But my appearance has changed a lot since middle school, right? Hairstyle, vibe, all that." "Well, that's true." 13 years is a long time. Plus, I doubt he even remembered my face from back then. Now that he mentioned it, that was true. I had been so absorbed in my own thoughts, forgetting that Kevin had also become distant from Michael. More importantly, seeing my current address and academic background, even with the same name, he wouldn't realize I'm his son. That might be true. 13 years ago, in his second year of middle school, Kevin had been, at best, slightly above average in his class. But after our divorce and his transfer to a new school, he began studying unusually hard. His grades suddenly shot to the top. He went to a high school that matched his academic performance, maintaining nearly the top spot in the science classes. Then he attended a prestigious national university. Recommended by a professor in his third year, He went straight through 5 years of graduate school. From his master's to his doctorate, achieving significant accomplishments in complex fields that I didn't quite understand. The scouting was due to these achievements, desired by several companies in the chemical and physical sciences. In other words, I was the one choosing them, Kevin said nonchalantly. That's why I asked for the interview. I had researched and knew he was the HR manager. I was surprised at his initiative. But he didn't change his expression even when he saw me. The interview was standard. Except Kevin had more questions to ask. So I asked the interviewer, "Does your company condone infidelity?" His face then lit up with a smile I had never seen before. And what did he reply, this HR manager? "Of course, it's not ethically acceptable," he said. Hilarious, right? So I continued, "That's strange. Then why are you here?" His face instantly froze. Kevin couldn't stop laughing. Then, thankfully, the executive next to him asked me what I meant by that. That's when I pulled this out, he said, showing a crumpled piece of paper. It was a copy of the divorce papers Michael had thrown at me. This is a copy of the divorce papers my mother was tricked into submitting by this man. What does your company think of this? You kept that copy all this time? I thought I had thrown it away. In fact, I was sure I had. I didn't want to see it. I thought I had to throw everything away and leave. Yeah, I picked it up after you threw it away. That's why it's all wrinkled like this, kept in a clear file. I thought it should never be lost. Why? Because this is evidence of what he did to you and of forging a private document. Oh! That's not all. There's forgery of private documents, and, well, other things. Plus, the divorce papers themselves were invalid at that time, so if he married another woman, it would be bigamy. Bigamy? I'm not an expert, so I asked a friend from the law department at university about it, whether this could be a crime. A crime? Yeah. A clear crime. So I told them right there, isn't this forgery of a private document? I gave a copy of the copy to the executive. I see. The original of the copy is here, so a copy of the copy. But with my fingerprints on the copy, I'm not handing over the actual evidence. And guess what he did next? What happened then? Suddenly, he stood up and shouted, "You're treating your father like a criminal." And then, he kept insisting to the executive that what I was saying was a blatant lie, a misunderstanding. Huh? I couldn't help but feel amused. What was that man thinking? But you've got to give it to the executive. He seemed to understand what I was getting at. He turned the questions towards him. You know, there's a hierarchy in companies, right? I guess he was aiming for the executive's position. It seemed like the executive was assessing his character. First, he kicked him out of the room, then turned to me and said, "Did you ask for this interview not for a job, but for this?" Yeah, I did apologize. I'm truly grateful for the scouting from your company. It's a very attractive company. But I wondered, what if it's an unethical company that would just keep a person like him? Bold as brass. I couldn't believe he could say that so smoothly in an interview. The executive was really a great person. Whether or not I join, he thanked me for letting him know. He mentioned when Dad remarried after the divorce, he wondered why Dad chose a much younger woman. And he remembered you, Mom. Really? Yeah. You said our wedding was small scale, right? The executive was there as one of the few guests, as a supervisor back then. That's so. But he said that Dad had been telling everyone around him that he was the one cheated on, but he didn't ask for alimony and just divorced. However, the executive had his doubts about why Dad didn't take custody of me. He guessed it might be me from the photo and the name. What? At that time, you didn't have the knowledge to fight back, so we were thrown out. That's true. I'm so sorry. If it were now, I'd definitely fight with a lawyer, but back then, It's okay. I know you were a full-time homemaker before being suddenly thrown out and had to start working to raise me. Mom, I don't remember much about Dad. He was always gone, maybe working, maybe not. Yes, Michael was hardly ever home back then. Perhaps marrying me was a mistake for him in the first place. He rarely took me to his family's home. Only during holidays, and when we went, I was just made to help in the kitchen. And otherwise, we just missed each other with his work. He said he bought a house, but he decided it, and suddenly we were living there. I realized in elementary school that our family was different. So I acted out a bit back then.
What? You did?
Yeah, an early case of teenage rebellion. So right when I entered middle school, I sensed there was another woman.
What are you saying?
I didn't tell you because I thought it would make you sad. But I regretted not speaking up, especially when he threw the divorce papers at you and told you to leave. His voice was strained. I had never heard Kevin speak like that before. Mom, I decided I needed a weapon that would make me indispensable. A weapon? Something that would let me eventually hold him accountable for what he did. Then Kevin said, I hate to say it, but I took your situation as a lesson on what not to do. A lesson? Yeah, maybe. He easily discarded you, and nobody could oppose it because you and your family didn't have the knowledge to fight back. To be honest, I'm also angry at your brothers.
You're not going to your uncles?
No, too much hassle. But even if I get a good job and succeed, I'll never associate with them. Oh, except Grandma. Really? I felt a bit relieved. Yeah. Because Grandma remembered your situation and repeatedly told me she was sorry.
When did she tell you this?
After I entered university. My cousins from your brother's side were acting flirty because I was in that university, which was annoying. I was shocked. I had no idea my nieces behaved like that. Hey Mom, what if we took Grandma in?
What?
She's always been sorry towards you. It seems painful watching her have to be careful around my aunt and them. Thank you. After we finished talking, I brought up something that had been on my mind. By the way, I've been getting a lot of calls from unknown numbers lately. Let me see, Kevin said, taking my phone. Oh, this. It's his family's number. The executive told me. Kevin said dismissively. Then he called them and put it on speaker mode. Hello? Hello, is that Kevin? It was my ex-mother-in-law's voice on the other end. Kevin muttered under his breath about her calling him by his first name. Yes, I heard from your father. You went all the way to a doctoral program at that university, and you're getting company offers. To think that a young man born to that woman turned out so well. It must be thanks to our family's blood. Kevin muttered to himself again. Hey, would you like to be adopted into our family? You're gonna be busy and need money, right? Better than staying with that poor woman. Plus, you're old enough now, right? We can arrange a good marriage for you. How about it? Sounds good, right? Kevin, are you listening? I apologize for being such a woman. I spoke coldly into the phone. By the way, did you think I had cheated?
Well, that's...
Oh, I see. It's not true. In that case, Kevin says he won't hold back. Let me pass the phone to him. Long time no see. I was surprised to hear from the company executive that my mom was accused of cheating. So, you were part of it too?
No, we were deceived by Michael.
You're calling my mom that woman, but you realize you were complicit in a crime, right?
What?
Unfortunately, the statute of limitations has passed, but your son committed bigamy by forging divorce papers and remarrying. It's embarrassing that I'm related to such a person. Of course, I want nothing to do with his parents. Oh, and a lawyer will be contacting your son soon from me and my mom.
You don't want the inheritance? When I die, it'll all go to you.
Kevin snorted. I don't need that. You should worry about the alimony payments instead. He ended the call. Did I go too far? I shook my head vigorously. And laughter bubbled up from within.
That's the spirit. If you're going this far, I need to step up too.
Kevin patted my back with encouragement. After that, I got a lawyer through Kevin's friend and started working on an alimony claim. The usual statute of limitations for alimony claims due to infidelity is 3 years. But I learned here about something called an exclusion period. It's valid for 20 years from the act of infidelity. I found out about Michael's cheating 13 years ago, but never investigated who he remarried or the details. I couldn't bear to think about it and didn't have the capacity. But I looked into it again. Included in the alimony claim were the facts of him forging the divorce papers and then submitting a marriage registration, constituting forgery and bigamy. Although we couldn't pursue criminal charges due to the statute of limitations, it served as a weapon for the alimony claim. I claimed alimony from Michael and his current wife and 4 years of child support for Kevin. After that, my phone started ringing non-stop again. Bigamy? What have you told him? You're ruining me. You want to destroy my wife and kids too? I let you live comfortably for 14 years. Don't think this will end here. So I replied just once. Why not sell your house then? And then I changed my phone number. As a result of our double attack, Michael paid the alimony, was demoted from HR manager, and transferred to a far-off factory as an assistant manager. I heard this from the executive I met again. Apparently, his new position is akin to a nominal busybody, unable to defy the factory manager.
Indeed, even with the statute of limitations, now that several of his crimes have come to light, his reputation has hit rock bottom. He was on the elite track in the company, but now it's over. The pharmaceutical company's factory is located far from the capital region. Michael had to sell his apartment and turn it into alimony for me as part of his transfer. That was the only way he could pay the amount we demanded. Moreover, his wife and children had to move with him. It seems she had no one else to rely on. She married him at 20, just like me, and had been a homemaker ever since, enjoying the status of a high-ranking husband's wife. That backfired. She wanted to stay in the capital region with her children, but that was impossible. Her parents' home is as rural as the place he was transferred to. Apparently, she's not well liked by her in-laws. But I have my doubts about the in-laws too. Given how they treated me, I'm not surprised, but marrying off their son to a 20-year-old bride twice should have been a sign for them to sort out their son. They should have advised their criminal son before cutting off their incompetent grandchildren. Well, that's probably why they cozied up to Kevin. Ah, here's a brilliant grandchild. But that's irrelevant to Kevin. By the way, I heard an interesting story. After settling the alimony issue, my lawyer shared this with me. Wow, that guy is really a city boy through and through. What do you mean? His new place of work requires a car. I clapped my hands in realization. He's over 50 and rushing to a driving school to desperately get a driver's license. Both he and his wife. His wife too? Without a car, they can't survive there. For things like taking kids to and from school, shopping. Also, in such rural areas, you won't get hired for part-time work without transportation. I laughed, realizing the situation. I have a driver's license. My mother insisted I get it, even lending me money for it. That was the right decision. Just hearing about them is hilarious. A proud former elite over 50, chased by mundane tasks, learning the hard reality of getting a license from strict driving instructors. And the following spring, Kevin entered a training institute of another company, finally able to focus solely on his research, enjoying every day. Revenge is over. Now it's time for fun, for my youth. Well, an early marriage isn't always good, right? My mother, who now lives with us, often muses. Exactly. Kevin, who never had time for a girlfriend, now has the chance to find someone right for him. With Kevin's employment, we moved to a slightly bigger place, roughly midway between our workplaces. For a while, the three of us want to peacefully enjoy these long-awaited days.